We are live. It's noon in the Eastern time zone. I'm Jeff Timmer from the Lincoln Project, joining my friends at Lincoln Square today, and with me is a frequent and familiar face to you folks, David Pepper. He's a political figure. He's an author. He's a painter. He's got a whiteboard on Twitter, or at least you had the whiteboard for a period of time. I don't know if
Yeah,
you got
I
it with you
still
today.
do. I still do.
Uh,
When I'm compelled or inspired.
yeah. Well, David, let's you wrote an interesting piece on Substack just recently, lessons from a pro-democracy convening, and it was really timely as we watch not only uh, election in Poland, the collapse of the government in the Netherlands, the rise of right wing political movements, authoritarian political movements. They can be left or right. They're predominantly of the right today, and certainly in the United States, it's happening here. What are some of those lessons? What should people be looking for? What are some things they can do? Let's just start the conversation with the what did you find at the conference? What were the takeaways?
Yeah, it was really worthwhile, and I can't get into all the names because it was sort of stated sort of in a closed room, but we can certainly share some of the lessons. Um, but it was just great to hear from people with international experience battling autocracy, people from within. There were political leaders, there were um, academics. And a couple of the key takeaways that I tried to highlight, was that and people watching you would know a lot of this, but there are a lot of tactics to, attacking democracy, and I'll just you know, what we're seeing with the judicial system, rewarding complicity, cracking down as Trump is on anyone who's viewed as the opposition. These are all red flags. But one of the real take homes was if you're gonna do like a chart of it, at the heart of it, one of the most effective and key things that those that are lurching towards autocracy want to do is create an illusion that it's all inevitable. And that's something that I think I haven't focused on as much. But once there's a sense, and Donald Trump projects this. I mean, he has literally things where he's comparing himself to God or something like crazy memes. And amid all the many things they are doing that we probably mostly you and I and others call out, underneath it, if they can create a sense of inevitability to it, it really changes behavior and it changes the incentive system. Because if people really kind of conclude, oh, it's just going to happen because it happened in Hungary and it happened in Russia and they've won a bunch, people just behave differently. We see it with law firms. We
Hmm.
we know that what they're doing to these law firms is illegal, just
Hmm.
like what they're trying to do to universities is illegal. But if you sort of are convinced where they're just going to succeed, then you cave. And if you just assume they're going to succeed, then you don't fight because you're worried you're going to be punished for fighting. So them creating an illusion of inevitability adds sort of some power to everything they're doing. And I think one of the lessons is we just can't let that set in. And sometimes on our bad days, we kind of do. And so I think one thing that and the truth is, as much as they have momentum, we've also seen in Europe, even in recent years, that it isn't inevitable, that people do fight back, that like the election in Wisconsin here, Musk put in all that money and the pro-democracy candidate won. So I think making sure that they are not succeeding in creating this sense of inevitability, which, if it settles in, is very powerful and really changes a lot of how people behave, react, decisions they make. If something feels inevitable, then it becomes more rational to go along with it. If it's 50-50, then fighting back makes more sense. And so we have to really, I think, battle back this. And I think they're very, very intentional about creating the senses, hey, this is just going to happen. And we have to really not let that settle in.
I think that is so important. When I think back, we're coming up on the 10-year anniversary of Donald Trump descending the golden escalator in Trump Tower. I believe that coincides with the weekend of his military parade and birthday coming up. And one of the constant refrains that I've had in my interviews and commentary and on social media is, let's never forget there are more of us than there are of them. And by us, it's not Democrats or Republicans. It's pro-democracy Americans, Americans who believe in the ideal of America, that
Yeah.
strive to a more perfect union, the living under the constitutional boundaries. The rule of law matters more than partisanship.
Yeah.
And and Trump has the MAGAs have always tried to create this illusion, and maybe some of them are foolish enough to believe the illusion that they're the silent majority, right? That they're
Right.
representing the great masses out there. That's never been the case. They've never enjoyed a majority of support.
Right.
That's the critical. Even in this last election, they claim this massive landslide. Trump, depending on which utterance, the greatest landslide in history, the greatest landslide in the last 100 years. None of which is true. He barely
Right.
won, less than 50%. That's an illusion, but
Right.
it's repeated enough that it starts to take root, and it does. It gets exhausting after 10 years of waking up and doing this every day, fighting Trump and Trumpism. It does get exhausting sometimes, but we can fight back and fight back successfully. He's been beaten. They've been beaten, and it's part of it's overcoming that psychological aspect. It's a psyop.
Yeah.
They're trying to create this illusion that he's strong, that he's a great negotiator, that he
Right.
knows what to do with the economy. I know better than the banks and Powell and everybody what needs to happen with our fiscal policy and monetary policy and trade policy. None of this is real. It's all veneer on this very scared, very fragile movement person, and
Yes.
Donald Trump and movement. The people around him are governed by fear, and we need to focus on that. Despite the fear, despite the threat, the hope of what was, what can be, and what we can do together.
Yeah. No, I agree. And what one another thing that's related to that is, we know and Steve Bannon says, flood the zone, overwhelm. Like that's clearly what the first 100 days have been. And even though most of the steps are essentially clearly illegal. I mean, some of them would be legal if done through Congress, but they skip that part. And so some of it's getting stopped. But another thing that came out that I really emphasized is they want flood the zone. We need to convert it in the near term to, again, not to be too dramatic with the language, a war of attrition. That
Mhm.
it and since we are in the end larger in numbers and the majority do support a democracy, a rule of law, representative democracy, if at the very least, and we don't have, another, we have elections in Virginia that are very important this year in New Jersey, but the midterm is the big opportunity to really put a stake in the ground and allow ourselves to have majorities and stop it. So in the near term, it's all about, as someone said, creating a lot of as much friction as we can, everywhere we can. Court friction, slow things down, grind it to a halt, war of attrition. Just yesterday, after sending out this newsletter, I went and sat down with a woman who happened to be a fourth grade classmate of mine who is gathering signatures to stop one of these anti-education bills that did pass in Ohio that would do great damage. That's what we're talking about. In Ohio and in other states, we have the ability to demand referenda and repeal bills. I hope they succeed, but you bet I'm going to support any effort that creates any friction. Every time Trump does something illegal, again, tears through executive order as opposed to through Congress, every time there's a delay in months because of that, that is to the good. So think about your role that we want it to be a war of attrition. Right now, they do have a lot of power, and everything we can do from protesting on the street to going to court to repealing laws to winning special elections, you name it, to simply communicating better. That is all to the good. So people should think about what can they do to be part of that. Just like this woman I met with yesterday, I had a little fourth grade reunion. She's doing that. wherever you are, there are ways that you can help do that type of work. And I also think in the long and that also, when people see that, that courage can be contagious for others to do it. One of the things I worry about, although we're the majority, being for democracy, and every I think poll or indicator shows us that they scaled up their anti-democracy assault a long time ago. The scale of their effort, be it billions of dollars, be it, full on assault government, taking over media, their scale is very big.
Mhm.
Our scale is, for the most part, kinda volunteers, like, trying to do small things. I don't think the mayors of America, for example, are doing nearly as much as they could to lift their voters who have been purged. And so I think the other thing we have to think about is we're bigger, our base is bigger, but the scale of our activity is not as full as theirs. And we got to scale it up in many, many ways. And everyone starting to do that does kind of create this war of attrition, this friction that every month that we gain by doing that gets us closer to midterms where we can really fight back.
Let's talk about an opportunity that has presented itself through circumstance. Maybe it could have been predicted, but we have one of the chief architects, the guy who's been at the right side, the right arm of Donald Trump these last 4 months, Elon Musk. Leaves his official role with the White House last week, and this week now he's suddenly firing at the big beautiful bill.
Yeah.
Trump has and the MAGA have made this the centerpiece of his second term. If we're able to, through attrition, slow this down, prevent
Yeah.
it from happening,
Yeah.
this is an opportunity for the wheels to come off. And people, rightly so, are very angry with Elon Musk in the role he has played to date, and in this tragedy, this comedic tragedy that we're living through. But Trygve Olsen, who's one of our contributors here on Lincoln Square and a frequent guest on these types of shows, has what he refers to as the Stalin rule when it comes to fighting autocrats, and that is, you take allies where they come from. That Churchill, Roosevelt, the world knew that Joseph Stalin was the second worst human on the planet when they allied with him to defeat the worst person on the planet.
Right.
I'm not saying that we should go out and embrace Elon Musk as now suddenly a comrade in arms, but we should be grateful that he's, at least right now, his efforts are aligned with the greater cause of preserving American democracy. That seems like an opportunity for people to get active here and to, through tactics every day, they can put influence on their senators right now, where the bill's over in the Senate, and on their members in the House when it comes,
Right.
whatever the Senate comes back to the House. So that's something tangible that people can do with this kind of fighting autocratic scenario. Every day that bill is delayed, every month means that Trump isn't going to have that accomplishment uh, to crow about and add to that illusion of inevitability. And if stopping the bill would certainly show that the American people, and not the deep state, as the MAGAs would say, the American people, the Constitution, and the rule of law still prevail in this country.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not ready to embrace Musk yet for a lot of reasons, but
Me
when
neither.
but when they divide, their opportunities. Just like in December, and now he's running for governor of Ohio. When Vivek Ramaswamy was tweeting about wanting more, like, I think is the guy Screech from that one show, and less quarterbacks, and offended a whole lot of MAGA world. Their big divides, and while they have some things in common, I do think it shows that there are some and somehow they get rolled over, and you may understand better than I do why, but the ones who actually do sincerely care about deficits, at some point, it's obvious that Donald Trump doesn't. And to the extent that they divide and that we are united in a broader multi-partisan coalition, then yeah, those present big opportunities long term. Their division, and I think they're already sort of in the minority, but to the extent their divides become fierce, and they start to create real deep divides, and that's the opportunity for us to move in. And I know that, friends of mine in Congress who try and keep up with Republicans who hear the same kind of stuff, "Hey, these bills are crazy. Why would we go for them?" And then they always line up to do it, except for a couple of them. They try to build some bridges there, um, as they sort of try to do quietly. I think it ends up being important because, again, every week, every month, every court that strikes down some illegal act, that's all to the good. In if you've got this war of attrition mentality, especially to get us to November of 26. Um, yeah, we'll take it.
Yeah, no, I think that is important for viewers, subscribers to take away, is in this constant push and pull of hope versus fear, that there are things we can do, things you can do in your own daily life, whether it's support voices that are speaking out against this and taking efforts to slow down authoritarianism, support them on uh, platforms like Substack,
Yeah,
subscribe to their podcasts, get out there and share that material, those voices with others.
absolutely.
Earlier this year, there were 3 million people that gathered on a Saturday in protest, and that moved into May up to 9 million. And in a couple weeks, they're talking about it. There's a national push to get 20 million people into the streets around the country.
Yeah,
That's what we need. Bring one more, show up
yeah,
at those things. Bring
totally.
one more person with you that can start to demonstrate that there are more of us, that we care about this, that we're going to peacefully uh, stand in the way of this lurch toward autocracy. You used that term earlier. I think it's perfect here, and it doesn't have to. It doesn't have to continue. We can stop it, and if we're able to protract this rush, this quick action to flood the zone, if we're able to slow things down until we get into calendar year 2026, you think the Republicans in Congress? I certainly know they are a bunch of ginormous chicken shits. There's a lot of true believers that are MAGA in the cult, thugs by nature that enjoy this stuff, or that they like fighting for the sake of fighting. They like tearing down for the sake of tearing down. But most of those Republicans in Congress and in the Senate are still Republicans who would have been normal politicians in the before times, and they're more afraid of Donald Trump than they are of us. They're more
Yes,
afraid of those voters in the primary than they are of the majority in November. And
right,
we can get into the shield that they have through gerrymandering and
right.
all in so many but to demonstrate visually, optically, it makes a big difference.
Totally.
We see that in other countries. It's something that we haven't typically had to do here. Mass protest against our authoritarian government is not an American thing. This is a foreign concept to Americans for a reason. It's just not been the case that we haven't had the normal transitions of power. A party who loses an election refusing to admit they lost and trying to seize power is it's just that's un-American. And now,
Yeah.
since 2021, we're in this. Kind of surreal, in between normal worlds. We can get back there if we have the patience and if we stick to it and don't give up.
Yeah, no, I do, and I agree with you. I'm jealous when these other much newer democracies, we see protests movements that are so big. I mean, the images are overwhelming, and one of my attitudes is, why are we the ones always surprised by what they do? When do we start surprising them? Okay.
Yeah.
When can we do something that they're like, wait a second, we didn't see that coming? And where they're taken aback and they're scared. And I think there are many ways to do that, but the most is crowds of size that nobody's seen. Literally. Make them so big not just in the blue parts of our country, but in red parts that they're like, "My god, I've never seen anything like this. This is shockingly big." So
Yeah.
big that they don't expect it. And so I think that is a really important part of it, is that it's so big. And then I think, uh, the closer we get, we've gotta start channeling that energy into really productive directions. And by the way, so I completely, and I've been at a lot of these protests, but one thing that gets me a little bit, and you, again, you may know this more than me. What was Karl Rove doing in 2009 when Obama won and we dominated everything? Was he dreaming about the 2012 presidential primary, or was he trying to win in 2010 at the state level up? I'll give you a hint. He wasn't thinking about Mitt Romney. He was taking the energy of rallies that then were called the Tea Party, and he was channeling it into making sure that they were running at the state house level all over Ohio, all of other states that they had lost, and they stormed the castle in 10 by
Mhm.
channeling that energy. So when we have these big rallies, don't just think, "Oh my gosh, let's swoon over whatever speaker spoke and add them to our list of who we may want to run for president in 28." 28 is a long time away. We've got to save democracy long before then, and we're going to save it in elections long before then. So take the glory, the greatness of a protest isn't the famous celebrity style candidate on the stage. It's the people in the crowd who can become the candidates for office in 25 and 26, and all the others who should hopefully quickly be told, take this energy and bottle up to show up in 25 and 26 when the next elections and midterms, those are the offices, be it state house, secretary of state, state auditor in Ohio that controls gerrymandering. These are the frontline democracy positions. So channel the energy of these rallies into near-term political action. That's how Howard Dean operated with 50-state strategy when we were out of power. That's what Rove did. And so every time I see these lists, oh my gosh, this is another 28 can. Like, no, I don't right now, that's not my concern. You wanna win the war of attrition, win every special election between now and 26, and then go to town in 26. That's not just for Congress, but all levels. That's the opportunity by these big crowds. So surprise them by the size of the crowds, and then harness the energy of these crowds into near-term political action. That's how you start to claw back out of this thing.
I I think that's great advice and tremendous insight. When you were talking about, we need to do something to surprise them rather than react, it made me immediately think of what's our version of the Ukrainian drone strike deep within in Russia rhetorically. I don't want to. I'm
Right,
not
of
talking
course.
about. I want to keep stressing that. But what can
Yes,
we do to upset the strategic paradigm that they've
exactly.
created and disrupt that. And we don't need to be audacious and sneaky. We can do this by marching, visibly forward into the streets. And
Yeah,
I think what you're onto there is can be when you mentioned the 2010 and the way that Rove was able to harness the energy or Howard Dean, the difference between then and now is whereas the partisan battles felt bigger than they were, they were normal. There wasn't a fear, or a prevailing fear for the existential fear for the survival of the nation, of democracy, of the rule of law. It seems to the circumstances are similar, but the risk. Of failing is greater what we would face, and
yeah,
that I think can take that energy that exists and magnify, amplify it by exponential factors.
yeah,
Uh, um, you go back to the old Churchill phrase, or it's attributed to Churchill, that you can always count on Americans to do the right thing when they've exhausted all
yeah,
other possibilities.
exactly.
We're at that point now. It's up to us. No one's
Yeah,
going to come and save us but
mhm,
us. And no one's going to save this country. Uh, it still is the aspirational, or still can be, the shining city on the hill that Reagan described. The what Put in whatever metaphor, that altruistic goal that is the American ideal, not necessarily the American reality, and we can keep trying to perfect those imperfections. When we have normal, sane political world, we can start
Right.
to we can start to do those things. But first, we have to apply triage, stop the arterial bleeding here, if we're going to have free and fair elections in 2026, let alone
Right.
2028. We have to be visible now.
Abs
Otherwise, we have to expect that they're going to try to. We saw what they did in 2020 and 2021. They're better prepared. Yes, they're incompetent ass clowns so much of the time they screw up what they intend to do, but they've had a lot more time to plan, and they're much bolder than they were even at the end of that first term, and they're energized, they're emboldened. They need to be rhetorically punched in the mouth, and caused to rethink
Yeah.
all their life
Well, let me say, you said this earlier, and I saw someone comment on this. I'm watching the comments come by. Yeah, a big group of this of what we're talking about are cowards. And as you said, the question is, what are they afraid of? They're not going to all of a sudden find a spine. But they are afraid of Trump and not of a spirited general election where they got to defend, Medicaid cuts and the destruction of public schools, which, as you know, in rural parts of states like ours, the public school is the heart of that community. So when you start pulling money away from those schools, you're really going to offend Republican voters too, believe it or not. And we need them to be afraid of us doing to that and talking about those things in the general. And so they are operating through fear, but we've got to be big enough, loud enough, and running in more places. So they actually are afraid that their world where they're comfortable may change if they don't change their behavior. This is one reason, I'm quite critical, although it's gotten a lot better in the last couple of years. When we leave half of these seats uncontested, they're not afraid of anything. They're not gonna lose, and they know it. No one in their district even knows what they're voting for that is against the interests of people in their district. So we have to, as I said, channel the energy. I want the state rep or congressional member in a rural community to start having his neighbors say, I didn't know you cut my Medicaid. Why the hell would you do that? This will be the first time many of them will have heard criticism in their district. If we're not running these places, they never hear it at all. I want them to go through a parade where they're used to being greeted like a hero to hear consistently, you took away our Medicaid. Or our local school, we have to pay $1,000 to play sports because you got rid of some of the funding of the only school within 20 miles of here. That's how you start to get into their heads. They may still win the election in a gerrymandered world, but if they start hearing from us consistently because we're out there, because we're running, it could get in their brain. And sometimes they'll lose because of these things. We've seen some pretty crazy special elections in the last couple months, but we have to be on offense. Again, that's what would surprise some of these people. I've never heard people give me grief. I've never even had an opponent sneak up on them, run everywhere, bring some energy to it, and that's the best way that win or lose, you might start to change some of these bad behaviors where they fear Trump more than they fear everybody else.
Well, we are at the end of our scheduled time. David Pepper, any parting words for this audience before we let you go? I do want to say, I'm going to ambush you a little bit here and say I'd love to have a conversation in the future that focuses on corruption in government.
Yeah,
You've experienced that in Columbus.
sadly.
We have a lot in Michigan where I'm based, and we're seeing that now play out on at scale and on the national level, and that is also a very related to this lurch toward
Yeah.
authoritarianism
Well,
and lawlessness. Then it
here's
fits
the
into
book,
this. There you go.
Autocracy Inc. Tied to the hip of attacks on democracy is corruption. It's often the goal, and it's the money that fuels it. And you see in states like Ohio, once you see accountability go away, corruption immediately follows. So I'd love to talk about that. Unfortunately, Ohio, we've been named the most corrupt. People like to debate that it must be some other state, but because of the most recent bribery scandal, we lead the country. It's tied to the hip together, and
Yeah.
it's. But by the way, it's also one of the opportunities to overturn the whole thing because corruption ultimately means terrible results for everyday people, like the undermining of schools, higher costs, you name it. But yeah, it's part and parcel with it. What can I say one thing to close? You mentioned this. The other one of the most um, worrisome take homes from this conference I went to is what someone described as the right wing narrative dominance of new media. That if you look back, something like 82% of the highest viewed podcasts, social media channels, YouTube channels, 82% were right wing dominated. Many of them didn't even start out as political podcasts. They were people doing other things who over time were invested in by the right wing. And you mentioned this sharing.
Mhm.
We need to combat this. If we're basically Democrats in the last year weren't even basically in the conversation where so many people, especially young people, are getting their political content. And so whether it's this, using
Mhm.
Substack Live, whatever it is, sharing, starting, getting it out there, if we don't change what is currently a right-wing dominated ecosystem that is especially talking to younger people, we got a real problem. So you mentioned earlier on, one
Mhm.
of many roles that people can play is don't assume people know what you know or learn what you learn from even things like this. I learn all the time things I think everyone knows. I write about it and most people say, "I never even knew that. I thought they did." So please play a role here in sharing, creating content, because right now, in the world that we are in right this moment, it's being dominated by the far right. Joe Rogan, just one of many, many examples. So whatever we can do to help balance that, we have to do. We got to get real smart about it right away.
All right. Well, thank you, David Pepper. Always great talking with you. And folks, thanks for tuning in and listening, and for subscribing.
Yeah.
Uh, tell us, tell them where. Tell your friends, family about David. Tell them about Lincoln Square. Subscribe to Substacks. Learn more about this. Stay engaged. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.